When your soul begins to grow, it does not ask permission. It quietly pulls you away from everything that cannot rise with you. Transformation naturally creates distance. Growth requires space. It is one of the quietest truths of human life, a truth we rarely recognize while we are in the middle of it. But the moment we begin to shed old skins, old fears, old beliefs, and old versions of ourselves, the world around us begins to shift. Not because the world has changed, but because we have changed inside it. When the soul starts rising, it creates its own gravity, pulling you away from what once held you down or kept you comfortable. And so, before you even realize it, a distance forms, gentle, silent, necessary. This distance is not a punishment. It is not abandonment. It is not betrayal. It is a natural unfolding, the same way a seed breaks away from the darkness of the soil to make room for light. In the early moments of personal transformation, the heart becomes tender, almost fragile, stretching itself into the unknown. To protect that delicate process, you feel yourself stepping back, making room, carving out silence where noise once lived. You begin craving solitude, not because you are tired of the world, but because you are finally listening to yourself. Growth asks for room, room to think, room to breathe, room to release what no longer belongs in the chapters ahead. And sometimes that room comes in the form of distance. Distance from people who drain your energy. Distance from conversations that no longer match your values. Distance from environments that feel too small for your expanding spirit. Distance from the version of yourself that once survived but is no longer capable of thriving. When you are transforming from within, the inner voice that you once ignored becomes louder. It asks questions you never dared to ask. It challenges every comfort zone you tried to live inside. It pushes you toward truth, even when that truth feels unfamiliar. And with each new layer of awareness, you find yourself stepping away from anything that interrupts your sense of peace. This stepping away can confuse others. It may even confuse you at times, but the heart knows what it needs before the mind can understand it. There is a quiet wisdom in distance. It allows you to see your life from a higher vantage point. It shows you who has walked with you out of love and who has walked with you out of habit. It reveals which connections were rooted in genuine understanding and which were held together by emotional convenience. When you are too close to everything and everyone, you cannot see their impact clearly. But distance brings truth into focus. And as you grow, you will notice something else. Your energy becomes precious, not expensive, not limited, precious. You spend it more intentionally. You invest it more selectively. You no longer pour it into situations that bring no nourishment. You no longer offer it to people who only take without giving back. Growth teaches you that not everyone deserves access to the softest parts of your spirit. Not every environment deserves your presence. Not every conversation deserves your attention. When transformation begins, you stop chasing what was never meant for you. You stop fighting for spaces that suffocate your authenticity. You stop explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stop apologizing for your silence because you finally understand that silence is not emptiness. It is protection. It is clarity. It is rebirth. Distance allows you to reset. It gives you space to reintroduce yourself to yourself. It helps you see your wounds without judgment and your strengths without doubt. It helps you rediscover the dreams you buried beneath responsibility, fear, or comfort. It reconnects you with the hopes that once lived inside you but were pushed aside by people who could not see your vision. Growth brings those dreams back to life, and distance gives them room to breathe again. There will be moments during your transformation when you feel lonely, moments when you wonder if you are losing too much, walking too far, or changing too quickly. But loneliness and solitude are not the same. Loneliness is the presence of emptiness. Solitude is the presence of yourself. And the more you grow, the more you understand that solitude is a friend, not a threat. It is in the stillness of solitude that the next version of you begins to form. Transformation asks you to leave behind what cannot stay. It demands a shedding of weight in the form of people, habits, beliefs, routines, expectations. Not because you are better than what you leave behind, but because you are becoming better for yourself. And sometimes the people around you will not understand this. They will misinterpret your distance as rejection, attitude, or coldness. But only you will know the truth. You are making space for your evolution. There is courage in stepping back, courage in choosing yourself, courage in letting go of what no longer aligns with the direction your spirit is moving toward. Not everyone will walk with you through every season of your life. Some are meant only for a chapter, not the whole story. And that is okay. The distance that forms between you and others is not always a sign of conflict. It is often a sign of growth. As you transform, your heart becomes wiser. Your intuition becomes louder. Your boundaries become clearer. You begin to honor what you feel instead of suppressing it. You step into your power with intentional steps, not hurried ones. You move with purpose, not pressure. And in that movement, distance becomes a natural companion, guiding you toward the people, places, and energies that resonate with the person you are becoming. Growth requires space. Space requires distance. And distance requires strength. But once you embrace it, you will realize that this distance is not the end of your story. It is the beginning of your becoming. Your energy becomes selective when your spirit elevates. It is one of the most powerful shifts a human being can experience, yet it often arrives quietly, without noise, without drama, without announcement. It begins inside you, in a place others cannot see but can certainly feel. It begins the moment you realize that not everyone deserves full access to your heart, your time, your presence, or your peace. When your spirit rises even slightly, you begin to feel the difference between what nourishes you and what drains you. You begin to sense the vibration of people before they speak, the intention behind actions before they unfold, the weight of environments before you step inside them. You don't become judgmental, you become aware. You don't become distant, you become refined. A higher spirit never makes you harsh. It makes you selective, protective, intentional. There comes a moment when you realize that your energy is not infinite. It needs care. It needs protection. It needs boundaries. And suddenly, conversations that once entertained you now feel empty. People who once held a place in your life feel out of rhythm with your new inner frequency. You no longer feel obligated to attend every gathering, answer every message, or engage in every dialogue, not out of disrespect, but out of alignment, out of truth, out of necessity. When your spirit elevates, you lose interest in gossip, judgment, and chaos. You lose desire for drama disguised as connection. Your soul begins to crave depth. Deep conversations, deep authenticity, deep honesty, deep peace. Anything shallow feels like gravel beneath your feet. Anything false feels heavy in your chest. Anything forced feels like betrayal to your own growth. And so you begin to pull away from what no longer resonates. This selectiveness is not arrogance. It is evolution. Think of a flower. It opens only to the light that supports its growth. It does not bloom for every shadow, nor does it lean toward every noise. It chooses the sun that feeds it. You are no different. When you elevate emotionally, mentally, spiritually, you begin to bloom toward what sustains you, not what drains you. Your energy becomes like a sacred currency. You invest it instead of spending it. You share it instead of scattering it. You offer it to those who honor it, not those who misuse it. The world may not understand this shift at first. People who are accustomed to your availability might interpret your selectiveness as distance or coldness, but a rising spirit cannot shrink itself to comfort those who refuse to grow. It cannot dim itself to make others feel brighter. It cannot neglect its own calling to soothe someone else's comfort zone. The heart knows when it is ready to ascend, and in that ascension, it chooses peace over pressure. It chooses authenticity over approval. It chooses growth over familiarity. What you once tolerated becomes intolerable. What you once ignored becomes clear. What you once accepted out of fear, you now decline out of strength. This is when you begin to realize that your spirit has entered a new level. The old you tried to be everything to everyone. The old you overextended, overgave, overstayed, and overlooked your own needs. But the elevated version of you understands balance. It understands reciprocity. It understands that giving without receiving is self-neglect, not generosity. You begin valuing connections that feel mutual, conversations that feel meaningful, and environments that feel peaceful. And with this awareness comes a deep inner cleansing. You cleanse your space, your mind, your habits, your relationships. You cleanse the old stories that told you you're not enough. You cleanse the belief that you must endure mistreatment to earn love. You cleanse the idea that shrinking yourself keeps the peace. When your spirit elevates, you begin returning home to your worth, your voice, your soul, your truth. This selectiveness is not just about people. It is also about how you treat yourself. You become selective with your thoughts, choosing not to entertain the ones that belittle your growth. You become selective with your emotions, refusing to pour them into spaces where they are unappreciated. You become selective with your boundaries, guarding them with the same gentleness you once used to break them. Your days begin to change too. You crave stillness in the morning, clarity throughout the day, gentleness in your interactions, and peace in your nights. Your spirit becomes a tuning fork, and it vibrates differently. It hums when you are aligned. It aches when you are not. It warns you when something is off. It guides you when something is right. And it teaches you that not everyone can accompany you on every stage of your journey. Some people exist only in the season where your spirit matched theirs. As you rise, they may remain where they are or even decline. You cannot force anyone to elevate with you. You cannot shrink your light to fit their darkness. You cannot lower your vibration to make them comfortable. Your spirit teaches you the sacred art of release, letting go without resentment, without guilt, without bitterness. You begin valuing quality over quantity. One genuine conversation becomes more valuable than a dozen shallow ones. One true friend becomes more meaningful than a crowd of acquaintances. One peaceful evening becomes more healing than 100 moments of forced excitement. You learn to trust the quiet, to trust the stillness, to trust the spaces where your spirit can breathe. And with this inner elevation comes courage. The courage to say no, the courage to walk away, the courage to outgrow what does not nourish your soul, the courage to choose yourself even when others don't understand, the courage to allow your energy to move where it is respected, not wasted. When your spirit elevates, your perception changes. You see people more clearly, not through their words, but through their energy. You notice who speaks peace and who stirs chaos. You notice who respects your boundaries and who attempts to cross them. You notice who lifts your spirit and who weighs it down. You no longer excuse behavior that your spirit has outgrown. You no longer justify connections that drain your light. You no longer allow access to those who misuse your kindness. Your energy becomes selective because your spirit knows what it took to reach this level. It knows the nights you cried, the battles you fought, the healing you endured, the lessons you learned, the strength you found. It knows the storms you survived in silence, and now that you are rising, your spirit refuses to return to the spaces that once wounded you. This selectiveness is protection. It is maturity, it is alignment, it is wisdom. When your spirit elevates, you finally understand that your energy is your most sacred gift. Not everyone deserves it. Not everyone can hold it. Not everyone will honor it. And so your energy becomes selective because your spirit has learned its worth. Silence becomes nourishment, not loneliness. It is a truth you only discover when life has shaken you enough, softened you enough, and awakened you enough to understand that not every moment needs noise, not every space needs company, and not every silence is empty. Silence carries its own kind of fullness, a fullness that only reveals itself when your spirit is ready to receive it. There comes a point when the world feels too loud, not because the world has changed, but because you have. Voices that once comforted you now feel heavy. Conversations that once filled your time now feel shallow, and the constant hum of distractions, expectations, opinions, and demands begins to drain more than it gives. In those moments, silence steps forward, not as a punishment, not as isolation, but as a gentle invitation, an invitation to return home to yourself. You begin to realize that silence is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of awareness. It is the moment you can finally hear your own thoughts clearly, without distortion, without doubt, without interference. Silence becomes a mirror, reflecting everything you've ignored, everything you've hidden, everything you've suppressed. It shows you who you are beneath all the noise you learned to live with. At first, silence may feel uncomfortable. You may mistake it for loneliness because you are so used to filling every empty moment with something. Music, conversations, scrolling, distractions, anything that shields you from yourself. But when your spirit begins to grow, a shift happens. The discomfort of silence becomes the doorway to understanding. You start to see that the loneliness you feared was never in the silence. It was in the places where you couldn't be yourself. Silence becomes nourishment when you begin to listen to your own soul. When you stop running from your emotions and start honoring them. When you stop drowning your intuition with noise and start trusting it. When you stop suppressing your truth just to fit into spaces that do not see your worth. Silence begins to heal you slowly, deeply, gently. In silence, your breath becomes your companion. Your heartbeat becomes your reminder. Your thoughts become your teachers. You notice the subtle movements of your inner world, the places that ache, the places that glow, the places that need rest. You learn that silence is not an empty room. It is a sanctuary, a place where your spirit can stretch without judgment, where your wounds can breathe without pressure, where your heart can speak without interruption. Silence teaches you the art of presence. It invites you to experience the moment without rushing into the next. It slows down your mind enough for you to notice the softness of the air, the warmth of the light, the weight of your own existence. It teaches you to savor time instead of racing through it. It teaches you to appreciate simplicity instead of chasing noise. And slowly, you discover that silence brings clarity. It exposes the relationships that were built on noise rather than connection. It reveals the conversations that were empty fillers rather than meaningful exchanges. It shows you who truly understands you and who only understood your loudness, your laughter, your performance, but not your quiet truth. Some people disappear when you embrace silence, Not because you pushed them away, but because they were only drawn to the distracted version of you. Silence becomes nourishment when it becomes your safe space, a space where you can sort through your thoughts, recalibrate your heart, and gather your strength. It allows you to see what you have been avoiding. It allows you to process what you have been carrying. It allows you to meet yourself on a deeper level, one that noise could never introduce you to. In silence, you begin to understand your emotions with more compassion. You allow sadness to speak without shame. You allow joy to expand without guilt. You allow confusion to unravel without fear. Silence does not judge, it witnesses. It witnesses every part of you, the strong, the fragile, the uncertain, the hopeful. And in that witnessing, healing begins. You start to realize that silence is not loneliness. Loneliness is being surrounded by people who do not understand your soul. Loneliness is staying in connections where your spirit feels unseen. Loneliness is forcing yourself into environments where you must shrink. Silence, however, gives you permission to expand. It gives you space to exhale. It gives you a path back to your own voice. There is a profound power in being alone but not lonely, in sitting with yourself and feeling whole, in resting in silence and feeling safe. You begin to crave the stillness that once frightened you. You begin to seek the quiet moments where you can hear the wisdom of your inner guidance. This is how silence becomes nourishment. It feeds the parts of you that noise starved. It fills the spaces that chaos emptied. It strengthens the muscles of intuition, reflection, and self-awareness. It becomes the ground where your peace grows. It becomes the air that your courage breathes. It becomes the soil where your next version takes root. You learn that silence is where your spirit resets itself, where your purpose realigns, where your dreams whisper their next instructions, where your soul reminds you that you are more than the world's demands, more than your past, more than your fears. Silence pulls you into relationship with your higher self, the part of you that knows, the part of you that sees, the part of you that guides. And with time, silence becomes something you guard, something you honor, something you cherish. It becomes nourishment because it feeds your spirit what the world cannot: inner peace, deep clarity, and a sense of self that cannot be shaken by external chaos. When you learn to sit in silence without feeling alone, you discover the truth. You were never seeking the presence of others. You were seeking the presence of yourself. Old versions of you cannot survive in new chapters. It is one of the hardest truths to accept, yet one of the most liberating once understood. Every time your life prepares to evolve, something inside you must be released. Something must shed, something must soften, something must be left behind. You cannot step into a higher version of yourself while carrying the weight of who you used to be. And yet so many hold on out of fear, out of habit, out of nostalgia, out of the illusion that growth will feel familiar. But new chapters are not meant to feel familiar. They are meant to feel transformative. There comes a point in every journey when your soul whispers that you are outgrowing a certain identity. It might be a mindset that once protected you, a belief that once comforted you, a relationship that once made sense, or a habit that once felt necessary. And as difficult as it is to accept, evolution asks you to release what no longer aligns with who you are becoming. This is the spiritual law of growth. To rise, you must let go. Old versions of you, the fearful one, the overthinker, the people pleaser, the self-doubter, the one who apologized for existing, cannot breathe in the atmosphere of the life you are stepping into. They cannot survive the altitude of your becoming. They were made for survival, not expansion. They helped you navigate the world when you didn't know your own strength. But once you awaken to your power, those versions begin to wither. They lose their grip, they fall away. But falling away is not always gentle. It can feel like chaos. It can feel like confusion. It can feel like a loss of identity. When you outgrow who you used to be, it may feel like everything around you is changing. Relationships, routines, priorities, dreams. But in truth, it is you who changed first. The outside world is simply rearranging itself to match your inner evolution. In these moments, people will tell you, you've changed. They may say it with confusion. They may say it with disappointment. They may say it with admiration, but they will say it, and they are right. You have changed. You were meant to. You cannot stay small just because others are comfortable with your smallness. You cannot remain silent just because others fear your voice. You cannot keep dimming yourself to make your old world feel safe. Growth demands space. Growth demands courage. Growth demands release. The old you may have needed validation. The new you knows your worth without applause. The old you accepted emotional crumbs. The new you recognizes you were always deserving of a feast. The old you walked on eggshells. The new you walks in truth. The old you avoided confrontation. The new you speaks with clarity. The old you settled. The new you chooses. The old you survived. The new you thrives. But in order to step fully into this new chapter, you must let the old self die. Not violently, not harshly, but naturally, like leaves falling from a tree in autumn. They do not resist the change. They surrender to it. They trust that letting go is part of becoming. Your old self was a teacher, a guide, a stepping stone, but it is not your final form. Every experience you lived, every mistake you made, every heartbreak you endured shaped who you are today, but they are not meant to shape who you are becoming tomorrow. The version of you that clung to the past cannot hold the future. The version of you that feared change cannot build the life that awaits you. The version of you that doubted your strength cannot handle the blessings trying to reach you. And so life begins to strip away everything that anchors you to outdated parts of your identity. You may lose friendships, you may lose interests, you may lose routines, you may lose environments. And though it may feel painful, these are not losses. They are transitions. The universe is creating space. Space for new lessons, new connections, new opportunities, new strength. Think of a butterfly. The caterpillar cannot survive the transformation. It must dissolve. It must break down. It must let go of everything it once was. Not because the caterpillar was wrong, but because it cannot enter the sky in its old form. You too have wings waiting, but they require your surrender. Old versions of you cannot follow you into the next chapter because they were built for a story that has ended. When you cling to them, you delay your evolution. You sabotage your expansion. You dim your own future. So the universe, in its wisdom, removes what you refuse to release. Not to punish you, but to free you, to nudge you toward the life you are meant to live, not the life you've outgrown. Sometimes this transition feels like loneliness. Sometimes it feels like confusion. Sometimes it feels like a quiet emptiness inside you. But this emptiness is not a void. It is a clearing. The clearing before the next creation. The stillness before the next rise. The pause before the next chapter begins. You may find yourself questioning everything, your relationships, your desires, your purpose, your direction. This questioning is not a sign of losing yourself. It is a sign of meeting the new you. The you who no longer fits into old fears. The you who no longer tolerates half-heartedness. The you who no longer bends to be accepted. The you who chooses alignment over attachment. And the more you embrace this transformation, the clearer the path becomes. You begin to see that every old version of you served its purpose. The people pleaser taught you compassion. The fearful one taught you survival. The insecure one taught you humility. The quiet one taught you observation. Each version gave you something you needed, but now they have nothing left to teach you. What waits ahead requires courage. It requires authenticity. It requires the strength to walk away from anything that no longer feels like home within you or around you. New chapters are not written with old ink. New versions of yourself cannot bloom in the soil of old wounds. When you finally accept that the old you cannot stay, something magical happens. You stop resisting change. You stop fighting growth. You stop fearing evolution. And instead, you begin to lean into it. You begin to trust it. You begin to welcome it. You begin to understand that life does not take anything from you unless it is preparing to return something greater, something fuller, something higher. Your next chapter is not waiting for perfection. It is waiting for your permission. Permission to grow, permission to rise, permission to outgrow everything that once felt familiar but now feels limiting. Old versions of you cannot survive in new chapters because they were never meant to. You are writing a story that requires a stronger, wiser, more awakened version of yourself. And that version is ready. People who misunderstand your distance are not aligned with your evolution. This is a truth you come to realize only after you begin to rise within yourself, quietly, steadily, privately. When you start creating space to protect your peace, to understand your emotions, to rebuild your spirit, not everyone will understand that distance. Some will take it personally, some will feel threatened by it, some will resent it. But the ones who misunderstand it are simply not aligned with the direction your soul is growing toward. Distance is not rejection. It is not abandonment. It is not a sign that you feel superior or uninterested. Distance is protection. Distance is healing. Distance is clarity. Distance is the doorway you walk through when you're becoming someone new. And the people who truly see you, who respect your growth, who honor your boundaries, who understand your spirit, will never misinterpret that. When you begin your journey of transformation, your energy shifts, your priorities shift, your values shift. What once entertained you now exhausts you. What once felt normal now feels draining. What once felt comfortable now feels too small for the person you're becoming. As you rise, you naturally pull away, not because you're trying to distance yourself from people, but because you're trying to move closer to yourself. But some people can only understand you when you're available. Some can only value you when you're giving. Some can only connect with you when you're pouring into them. They've only known the version of you who tolerated too much, who stayed too accessible, who ignored your own needs for the sake of maintaining peace. When you finally choose yourself, they feel it as loss, even though it is simply alignment. Evolution demands separation. It demands seasonality. It demands the courage to step back from familiar environments that no longer nourish your spirit. And the truth is, the people who misunderstand your distance are often the ones who benefited from your lack of boundaries. They loved the version of you that gave endlessly, listened endlessly, sacrificed endlessly, and showed up even when your soul was tired. When that version begins to dissolve, they do not celebrate your growth. They mourn their access. But your evolution is not a negotiation. It is not a group project. It is not something you must explain, justify, or defend. Growth is a personal journey, and the people who are meant to walk with you will never fear your silence. They will honor it. They will understand that distance does not mean disconnection. It means transformation. People who misunderstand your distance often see you through the lens of their own insecurity. They assume your silence is about them. They believe your distance is a sign of rejection. They imagine your withdrawal is an attack. But your growth is not their wound to interpret. They are simply unable to see the inner work you're doing, the healing you're nurturing, the boundaries you're reclaiming. Distance reveals truth. It reveals who values you for your presence and who values you for your convenience. It reveals who understands the language of your soul and who only understands the language of their own expectations. It reveals who feels entitled to your energy and who respects your emotional autonomy. People aligned with your evolution will never require you to explain why you need space. They will trust your journey. They will trust your timing. They will trust your heart. You learn through distance that not everyone is meant to join you in your next chapter. Some are meant to be lessons. Some are meant to be memories. Some are meant to be mirrors. Some are meant to be catalysts, but only a few are meant to be companions. Evolution filters your life gently, naturally, spiritually. The ones who misunderstand your distance are simply part of what is being filtered out. As you evolve, you begin to see relationships differently. You notice who supports your growth and who feels threatened by it. You notice who celebrates your changes and who tries to pull you back into your old patterns. You notice who respects your boundaries and who tests them. You notice who listens to your truth and who listens only to their assumptions. People who misunderstand your distance are not meant to understand it because they are no longer vibrating at the frequency your soul is rising toward. Distance is a spiritual language, and not everyone is fluent in it. It speaks of self-respect. It speaks of self-awareness. It speaks of emotional maturity. It speaks of healing. The people who interpret your distance as a personal insult are not aligned with the mindset or the emotional depth required to walk beside you. They are aligned with the old version of you, the version who stayed available even when your heart was hurting, the version who remained present even when your mind was exhausted, the version who kept saying yes while silently breaking. But you are no longer that person. And your evolution requires that you release anyone who cannot meet the new standards your soul now holds. Distance becomes necessary when your spirit begins to rise. It becomes part of your protection. It becomes part of your cleansing. It becomes part of your clarity. Evolution asks you to step away from the noise so you can hear your own voice again. It asks you to step away from chaos so you can feel your own peace again. It asks you to step away from attachments so you can rediscover your own strength again. People who misunderstand your distance often misunderstand themselves. They expect you to be who you used to be, not realizing that your silence is your transformation speaking. They expect you to stay unchanged because your change challenges the stagnant parts of themselves. They expect you to remain available because your unavailability forces them to confront their own dependency. But your journey is not responsible for anyone else's comfort. As you evolve, you realize that distance is not about losing people. It is about finding yourself. It is about rediscovering the parts of you that were overshadowed by noise, demands, expectations, and routines. It is about choosing peace over pressure. It is about choosing alignment over attachment. It is about choosing growth over familiarity. And the people who are meant for your next level will never ask you to shrink. They will never shame you for needing space. They will never twist your silence into a story that paints you as the villain. Instead, they will understand that transformation sometimes requires solitude. They will understand that healing sometimes requires quiet. They will understand that evolution sometimes requires stepping back before stepping forward. The right people will not fear your distance. They will honor it. They will not question your silence. They will trust it. They will not demand your old self. They will embrace the person you are becoming. People who misunderstand your distance are not aligned with your evolution. Their misunderstanding is the proof. Their confusion is the sign. Their discomfort is the message. Your soul is rising and they cannot rise with it. Your evolution is not meant to be understood by everyone. It is meant to be lived by you, and the more you honor that truth, the more peaceful, powerful, and purposeful your journey becomes. Pulling away protects the inner work that is happening quietly. There comes a moment in every person's journey when the world feels too loud, too demanding, too eager to shape you before you've even discovered who you are becoming. And in that moment, something deep inside you whispers, step back, withdraw, come home to yourself. It isn't a shout. It isn't dramatic. It is soft, steady, and wise. And for the first time in a long time, you find yourself listening. Distance is not a punishment. It is a sanctuary. When you pull away, you are not rejecting the world. You are honoring a world within yourself that is still under construction. You are protecting the fragile beginnings of new strength, new clarity, new understanding. We live in a culture that praises constant motion, constant conversation, constant connection. But the truth is, transformation grows in silence, not noise. It grows in stillness, not chaos. It grows in the places where you allow yourself to simply be without performing, explaining, or proving. There is a season in personal growth where words feel heavy, where company feels overwhelming, where even the smallest conversation can feel like someone knocking on the door of a room you just cleaned, just organized, just made sacred. You don't want anyone tracking confusion across the floor of your clarity. You don't want anyone opening windows that let old winds in. You don't want anyone rearranging the furniture of your soul before you've decided where things belong. So you step away. And though others may misunderstand, though some may call it distance, withdrawal, coldness, or change, only you know what is truly happening. Something inside you is being rebuilt. Something inside you is taking its first breath. Energy that was once scattered is coming home to you. Pieces of you that were left in conversations, in relationships, in expectations are returning, and to welcome them, you must create space. Pulling away is an act of devotion to the next version of yourself. Growth is not always loud. Healing is not always visible. Strength is not always fierce. Sometimes strength is simply the willingness to say, I need time, I need space, I need room to become. You are not running from the world. You are running toward a deeper truth. You are not hiding from others. You are finding yourself. There is a sacredness in the inner work that cannot be shared too soon. Just as a seed is buried in darkness before it breaks into the light, your evolution begins in places no one sees. The soil around you is not loneliness. It is nourishment. The quiet is not emptiness, it is preparation. The absence of noise is not isolation, it is protection. We often forget that healing requires privacy, not secrecy, privacy. Secrecy is rooted in fear. Privacy is rooted in self-respect. You do not owe the world a front row seat to your becoming. You do not owe anyone a live broadcast of your transformation. Some chapters must be written in the quiet corners of your soul where only you can hear the turning of the page. When you pull away, you are choosing intention over impulse. You are choosing clarity over noise. You are choosing alignment over approval. You are choosing the slow, steady rebuilding of your spirit over the rushed expectations of others. That is not selfishness. That is wisdom. People may not understand why you need space. They may wonder what changed. They may take your silence personally. But your journey is not theirs to decode. Your evolution is not theirs to judge. And your distance is not a rejection of them. It is a recognition of you. You are learning to honor your pace. You are learning to trust your timing. You are learning to give yourself what you once begged from the world: understanding, patience, room to breathe. There is a moment in transformation where you realize that not every connection is meant to follow you into the future. Some are tied to old wounds. Some are tied to old patterns. Some are tied to versions of you that no longer exist. And when you begin the quiet inner work, you feel the subtle tension of those attachments. You feel how certain conversations drain you, how certain environments shrink you, how certain energies pull you back into a shape you no longer fit. Pulling away becomes a form of protection, not because you are afraid, but because you are aware. You are aware of what disrupts your peace. You are aware of what dims your clarity. You are aware of what derails your growth. You are aware of what tries to resurrect wounds you've worked tirelessly to heal. With awareness comes choice, and with choice comes freedom. Freedom often looks like solitude, not loneliness, solitude. The kind of solitude that feels like coming home, the kind of solitude where your breath steadies, where your thoughts soften, where your heart speaks in a voice you haven't heard in years, where you realize that you were not losing yourself, you were finally returning. Inner work is delicate. It is sacred. It requires your full presence. You cannot rebuild the architecture of your spirit while standing in the crowd. You cannot mend your wounds while entertaining distractions. You cannot learn your truth while drowning in noise. So you grant yourself the gift of stepping back. You move gently. You move quietly. You move inward. And in that inwardness, something powerful happens. You begin to see yourself clearly. You begin to hear your intuition again. You begin to understand your emotions without running from them. You begin to forgive parts of yourself you once condemned. You begin to feel the soft, steady glow of self-respect taking root. Pulling away is not disappearing. It is reappearing in a stronger, wiser, more grounded form. You are not becoming less by stepping back. You are becoming more authentic, more aligned, more aware, more whole. You are shedding the noise that once defined you. You are shedding the expectations that once shaped you. You are shedding the beliefs that once confined you. And when your inner work is ready to bloom, you will re-enter the world differently, calmer, clearer, more centered, not because you forced transformation, but because you protected it, because you honored it, because you allowed it to unfold quietly, gently, truthfully. Your distance is not absence, it is becoming. Your silence is not empty, it is full of the work your soul has waited years to begin. Your withdrawal is not the closing of a door, it is the opening of a new one that leads inward first, so you can walk outward with purpose, strength, and truth. The distance you feel now will later become the clarity you needed. It may not look like it today. Right now it might feel like separation, like confusion, like the soft ache of stepping away from what once felt familiar. You may question why your heart no longer feels at home in certain conversations, why your spirit pulls back from certain environments, why your energy suddenly grows quiet around people who once felt close. But the truth is simple. The space opening around you is not an accident. It is direction. It is guidance. It is the hand of your own becoming, gently leading you away from what no longer nourishes your growth. There comes a moment in every soul's journey when life asks you to step back before revealing what comes next. Growth rarely begins in comfort. It begins in distance. The kind you didn't choose consciously, but the kind your spirit recognized long before your mind understood. You are not losing your place in the world. You are slowly finding your place within yourself. What feels like emptiness is actually the clearing of old noise. What feels like silence is the soft beginning of a deeper truth. And what feels like distance is the preparation for a clarity that would not have been possible if you had stayed where you were. Distance gives you the blessing of perspective. When you stand too close to a situation, a person, or a chapter, you cannot always see its truth. The emotions blur your vision. The attachments distort your understanding. The history clouds your judgment. It is like trying to read a sentence with the page pressed against your face. Everything is there, but nothing is clear. You need space to see. You need distance to understand. You need room to breathe so that the wisdom hidden beneath the noise can rise to the surface. Right now, you might be wondering why certain relationships feel heavier than before, why certain paths feel misaligned, why your heart is no longer willing to fit into the spaces you once forced yourself into. The answer is simple. You are outgrowing what once held you. And when you outgrow something, distance forms naturally, not because you stopped caring, but because you started awakening. Your spirit begins to lean toward the light, toward truth, toward alignment, and anything that dimmed you, drained you, or distracted you begins to fall behind. This distance is a sign that you're becoming more honest with yourself. Maybe you spent years pretending something was fine when it wasn't. Maybe you held on to people who no longer held you. Maybe you silenced your intuition because you weren't ready to hear what it had to say. But now, in this quiet stretch of space, you can finally listen, and the truth comes gently, like dawn breaking after a long night. It tells you what is real. It tells you what is right. It tells you what is meant to remain and what is meant to be released. Clarity doesn't arrive in the middle of noise. It settles softly in the distance. It appears when the world grows still enough for you to hear the voice inside yourself. That voice has been waiting for you to stop explaining, stop forcing, stop overthinking, stop shrinking, waiting for you to step back long enough to remember who you are and what you truly deserve. Distance is the first step toward truth. When you pull away from the chaos, from the expectations, from the versions of you that were built for survival rather than growth, you create a sacred space where your soul can breathe. And in that breath, clarity begins to bloom. You start to see what was draining you. You start to understand why your spirit felt restless. You start to recognize patterns that once blinded you. You start to identify the subtle ways you abandoned yourself to keep others comfortable. And slowly, without force, clarity becomes your strength. You begin to realize that not every connection is meant to stay close. Some people were only meant to walk with you through a certain chapter, not because they were bad, but because they stopped growing in the direction your soul is moving. You start to see that not every opportunity was aligned with your purpose. Some were distractions dressed as blessings. Some were detours disguised as comfort. Some were lessons your spirit had already outgrown. The clarity that distance brings is the kind that transforms you. You begin to trust your instincts again. You begin to take your intuition seriously. You begin to honor your emotional truth instead of dismissing it. You begin to choose yourself without guilt, without apology, without hesitation. You begin to understand the difference between loneliness and peace, between shutting down and setting boundaries, between rejection and redirection. The distance you feel now is not a sign that your life is falling apart. It is a sign that your life is rearranging itself to support your highest good. You are being pulled away from what cannot go with you. You are being guided toward spaces that match your frequency. You are being prepared for relationships rooted in mutual growth, not imbalance. You are being positioned for opportunities that honor your worth, not exploit it. One day soon, you will look back on this season and understand why so much felt distant. You will see how the space allowed you to breathe again. You will see how clarity shaped your decisions. You will see how truth rose quietly from the silence. You will see how pulling away saved you from shrinking. You will see how distance was not a loss, but a lesson, and eventually a blessing. The confusion will make sense. The shift will feel purposeful. The quiet will feel holy. You will understand that clarity never arrives when your arms are full of old chapters. It needs space, it needs openness, it needs the courage to step back before stepping forward. Right now, you are in the middle of that sacred pause. You are in the in-between, not who you were, not yet who you're becoming. And though the distance may feel uncomfortable, it is shaping you, preparing you, strengthening you. It is helping you see the truth of your path, the truth of your heart, the truth of your worth. The distance you feel now will later become the clarity you needed. Trust the space, trust the silence, trust what your spirit is trying to show you. You are not drifting, you are aligning. You are not lost, you are being guided. You are not alone, you are with yourself, and that is where clarity always begins. So if you feel distant, do not fear it, honor it, respect it, because distance is the doorway, a doorway to clarity, to healing, to strength, to purpose. The world may not understand your silence right now, but your future self is already thanking you for it. Stand tall in your transformation, walk gently in your peace, and trust the journey that is unfolding within you.